You may have seen me on Saturday Night Live as a certain federal prosecutor. That was acting. But now we're going to hear from some real federal prosecutors. Recently, over 1,000 former federal prosecutors who served under both Republican and Democratic presidents have united to sign a statement to help Americans understand what's actually in the Mueller report. Their conclusion should trouble us all.
We all strongly believe that there is more than enough evidence to indict President Trump for multiple felony counts of obstruction of justice.
Of obstruction of justice.
Of obstruction of justice.
Of obstruction of justice. President Trump tried to fire Mueller.
And then tried to get others to lie and create false evidence about it.
If you or I did what President Trump did, we'd be facing prison.
And no one, not even the president, should be above the law.
In the words of the Mueller report, no person is above the law.
That was a portion of the new video for Now This that looks to explain the key findings of the Mueller report, featuring 11 former federal prosecutors, along with the legendary actor Robert De Niro. The effort attempts to outline evidence they say clearly shows President Trump obstructed justice. And joining us now is the director of that video, acclaimed filmmaker Rob Reiner. Rob, it's always great to see you. This feels to me like the right week for this, the right group of people to talk about this. I want to get specifically into the video that you put together with Robert De Niro, but more broadly about what you've seen this week as you listened to Robert Mueller make that presentation on Wednesday. What was your reaction?
Well, you know, here's the thing, Willie. A couple of days ago, as you know, Mueller made his statement, and it was wall-to-wall coverage on cable news. We've been talking about it ever since, and that's the reason why I made this video, and I'm going to make a couple more videos about the Mueller report, because people don't know what's in it. You know, everybody said, well, it's going to be a do-over and all this stuff. It's not a do-over. It'll be for the first time. Having Robert Mueller on television for 8 minutes basically took up everybody's oxygen, and we talked about this for days. We're still talking about it, and if we had hearings in Congress that was on television, the public would start to understand what's actually in the Mueller report, which is the biggest pile of criminality that has ever been put together against any president in our history. So that's what we're trying to do, get people to understand what's actually in the report, so that people will then say, well, I don't understand how we're not, you know, indicting or holding this president accountable through impeachment.
So, Rob, that report and what you've done here with this mini doc, you were part of a very literate community out there in Los Angeles. You make films that people go see, sit, and enjoy and understand. How many people that you encounter on a daily basis in that highly literate community do you think have actually read the Mueller report?
Zero.
Yep.
Zero. And the point is, nobody in America has read the Mueller report, including the President of the United States. He has not read the report, because if anybody sat down and actually read what was in that report, you would see criminality coming out of your ears. It's when he says he's been for 2 years has been saying the words no collusion and no obstruction and complete exoneration. That is so far from the truth. There is piles of evidence of collusion in the first volume of the report. Yep. And as we point out, over 1,000 federal prosecutors say it's a slam dunk. He would be indicted, but for the fact he's a sitting president.
As an educational tool, how do you go about explaining to people the contents of the Mueller report?
Well, we have 2 more mini docs coming up. One is going to focus on Volume 1, which is the collusion part, and the other is going to focus on Volume 2, which is about obstruction. And we're going to try to get people to understand what actually is in the report.
Hey, Rob, it's Jonathan Lemire. You're certainly right about the power of the images. The president himself has been worried for weeks about what would happen when Robert Mueller went before cameras and discussed what was in the report. But to what your movement here, what you're trying to do is increase awareness of the report. Do you believe that it will turn people even further, that the Americans need to indict or perhaps impeach this president? So therefore, is the actual target audience of this Nancy Pelosi?
The target audience is the American public. Nancy Pelosi is stuck in a tough situation because the public is not aware of what this president has done. You know, the comparisons all the time with Watergate, you had Senate hearings with all the players in public talking about what went on. That hasn't happened yet. We only get one side of the story, which is Trump talking and then Barr basically doing his Roy Cohn imitation and echoing everything Trump says. The public needs to see people on camera, under oath, talking about what happened, and then you're going to see a major shift, and it's going to be very easy for Nancy Pelosi to go down the impeachment path when the public is aware of what actually happened.
And that video for Now This, featuring 11 former prosecutors and Academy Award winner Robert De Niro, is available now. Again, it's Now This. Rob Reiner, always great to see you, my friend. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Willie. Thanks for having me.
And we'll be right back with more Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.